My channel recently reported on the auction of Old Carter. Some of the founders of that brand, in part, funded that operation by selling their interest in Kentucky Owl in 2007. The company that purchased Kentucky Owl filed bankruptcy on November 29, 2024. And if you want to know what this means, then stick around. Before I go any further, I'd like to thank the patrons. Everyone's names who are on the screen right now are contributing at the top 3 levels, and they help keep this podcast going. And if you want to learn more about how you can support this podcast, stick around to the end. Now, the company that we are talking about is Kentucky Owl. And Kentucky Owl was originally formed by Dixon Dedman, and he was resurrecting a family brand that had operated in the 1800s. Kentucky Owl was purchased by Stoli Group USA in 2017 for an undisclosed amount, but it made huge headlines when they got purchased because they also announced that they were going to spend $150 million building a whiskey Disneyland, or at least that's how it was described to people. It's supposed to be this huge whiskey theme park. I believe it was in Bardstown. It was, going to be awesome. And whenever they made the announcement, there was a lot of speculation from a lot of content creators and other people in the industry. And it just seemed like a really interesting, but also odd and risky move. Dixon ended up moving on after he sold his interest in Kentucky Owl, and he started 2XO, which makes some amazing whiskey. But Stoli Group USA, which Stoli as a brand, which, a lot of people associate the brand Stoli with a longer name that's in Russian that I can't pronounce. And the reason why it operated under 2 names is because Yuri Shelfer actually purchased the brand in 1997, and he grew up in Russia. He was a Jewish businessman. He was involved in an airline. He was involved with a shopping center and all this stuff. But he ended up buying Stoli, and the nation of Russia claimed that the entire brand of Stoli had fallen under the control of the Soviet Union whenever the Soviet Union fell, and that made the entire brand a Russian asset. So now Yuri found himself in conflict with his home country. He was actually exiled from Russia in the year 2000, and there's been kind of enmity between Yuri, the Stoli Group, and the Russian government ever since the beginning of his purchase. The Russian government still operates a arm of the Stoli brand from the state-controlled distilleries that they took over that are actually in Russia, and then Yuri is running all of the operations that are outside of Russia. Currently, they are their headquarters is in Luxembourg, but he has a large estate in Scotland. So, pretty interesting fellow. He, after a while, he has been able to make friends with all of these celebrities and whatnot. And he was most recently in the news, at least what I saw in 2021, because Angelina Jolie and her ex-husband were going through a dispute about all the assets that they had in common. And Brad Pitt actually filed some lawsuits in court against Yuri and Angelina Jolie because they owned a winery, and I'm going to try and say this correctly, Chateau Miraval, that they purchased together in France. And she was friends with Yuri and sold that winery to Yuri, and Brad Pitt filed some lawsuits saying that she didn't have the authority to sell it without his permission, and that Yuri did not have the authority to own it. And so he's been embroiled in a lot of controversies throughout the year, but being a billionaire, those things sometimes happen. He also at one point owned the world's largest yacht, which he sold to some Saudi prince or somebody for something like $550 million. So he's been in the news for some pretty interesting stuff. Most recently, he upset Russia because he had been providing some support to the Ukrainians in the Russian-Ukraine war. Russia has since named him effectively an enemy of the state. And so, lots of wild stuff surrounding Stoli Group, which purchased Kentucky Owl in 2017. So let's talk about the reasons for the bankruptcy. Well, first off, there's not a lot of financial details in the filing, but one of the things that they mentioned was that they have assets of somewhere around $100 to $500 million, which if you ask me, that's too broad of a gap to be useful information. They also said that they have liability somewhere between $50 and $100 million. So you can imagine that if they have assets of 100 million and liabilities of 100 million, that is not a good situation. So I would say that no matter how you slice that cake up, Kentucky Owl's purchase has certainly affected their debt load, because even if they paid for a large portion of the purchase with cash and didn't actually borrow the money that's currently on the books as liabilities for the purchase of Kentucky Owl, that cash could have been used to pay down debt, but for the fact that they had purchased Kentucky Owl. So we can assume that whatever it is that they paid for Kentucky Owl has negatively impacted their debt load for Stoli USA. The other thing that you have to realize is that when they purchased Kentucky Owl, the average published interest rate for commercial lines of credit was around 4.5% in 2017. And now the average bank published interest rate is between 8 and 9.25%. And so there is a very real scenario where the debt cost of purchasing Kentucky Owl, or at least the finance portion, or the portion that they could have used that cash to pay down that debt, all of that is now costing them literally twice as much money, simply because interest rates have gone up, because those are not fixed rate lending situations. So as interest rates goes up, your interest cost goes up. And if your revenue doesn't go up at the same time, then you might have a problem. And it looks like that's what happened. Welcome back to Pretentious Whiskey Reviews. Today, we're evaluating the 1982 Pappy Van Winkle. Ooh, I'm detecting a hint of Bolivian virgin tears and East Indian, no, West Indian grasses.
Y'all, you don't need all that crap. All you need is an American whiskey aroma kit from bourbonrealtalk.com. Developing your palate is a learned skill. Over time, you can train your taste buds without being a douchebag. Get yours today at bourbonrealtalk.com.
I'm also getting Indian nutmeg. When you look at the filing, they actually cited what they referred to as market headwinds. So everybody knows that there's some downward pressure on the spirits industry, and that is affecting sales. And I'm not sure whether or not all of the brands of Stoli are being affected, because they have Stoli Vodka, they have Elite or Elite Vodka, they have Cenote Tequila, obviously they have Kentucky Owl, and they have some other holdings as well. And some of those brands may be doing better in this market. But what we do know for sure is that Kentucky Owl was a non-distiller producer, and their business model was to buy higher age whiskey at extremely high prices and then release it at sky high prices. And so if you are to go to my local Total Wine right now and look to see what the price range is for the Kentucky Owl offerings that they've had available, the cheapest bottle is the Kentucky Owl Confiscated at $95, which is a non-age stated, non-disclosed product. So we know that this is Kentucky bourbon, but we have no idea who distilled it, and we have no idea how old it is, and charging $95 for that in this market is kind of a thing of the past. And they have some offerings that go all the way up to $400 for some higher age statements. And there's a lot of evidence indicating that that business model is just over. It's not possible for you to get consumers to pay prices like they used to. And like I said in the old Carter video, I think those days are done, because that was old Carter's business model as well. I also met an individual over the weekend that's from Oklahoma, and he was able to buy an entire case of 12-year Kentucky Owl for $100 a bottle. So it looks like they may be dumping some of their inventory in the market. And this is sometimes a strategy that you'll see cash-strapped companies engage in, where they're selling assets for below the price that they expected to sell them for when they acquired the assets, but they have no choice but to do so because they're short on cash and they have immediate liabilities, and that's the easiest way for them to get access to capital to keep from actually going into a insolvency situation, right? And so we're seeing them dump some of their bottles that they, in the past, they would have sold for hundreds and hundreds of dollars for only $100 a piece. And there's no way to know whether or not that's the break even or if they're still making money or if they're actually losing money at that price, but we know it's not in alignment with what they normally sell bottles for. We also can see statistics for Stoli vodka, and I think that this was also a major contributing factor in the bankruptcy, is that they had gotten their sales volume all the way up to about 1.8 million cases a year just in the United States. And since COVID has ended, people have started drinking less, at least at home, because they're not locked in their houses anymore. And their sales volume has gone from 1.8 million a year down to only 1 million cases a year. And so when you start to think about that as a business owner, you're talking about almost a 50, something like a 40 to 45% reduction in sales volume. To handle that higher sales volume, think about what you would have had to have done as a company. You would have needed to get buildings, warehouses. You would have had to have staff. If you need somebody who's going to move product around, you have to have a staff member, but they also have to have a forklift, right? And then you have to have accounting staff that are going to work in an office somewhere, and they have to have a computer and a chair and a desk and a cubicle, and they have to have a license for all the different softwares that you use, right? And you have to rent that separate office building and all of that stuff. And most of these things that you have to sign up for so that you have everything in place you need to handle that higher sales volume that came onto you relatively quickly from a one-off worldwide event that you couldn't predict and you can't sustain, most of those contracts are for a longer period of time, right? And what looks like happened is they got into a situation where they were signing all of these contracts to make sure they had everything in place to handle that 1.8 million cases, but those contracts outlasted the sales volume. And in addition to that, the Russian government is pursuing Stoli and filing lawsuits against them all around the world, stating effectively that the Russian government owns the brand and that Yuri doesn't have the right to operate in that country, and is asking for the courts to provide relief to hand over ownership of Stoli in that country to the Russian government. And I'm not sure whether or not there's any of those lawsuits going on here, but when you are a huge conglomerate that has, different entities in each state, it certainly does affect the overall financial picture if you're fighting a bunch of legal battles. So when you look at this situation, you've got rising interest costs. Interest could be up as much as 100%. You have rising operational costs because the cost of glass and labels and corks and gasoline and everything that's required to make your product and get it to market has gone up. You have increased competition because there have been so many other brands that have launched that are trying to carve up that market share. Americans are drinking less than they used to because of the COVID bump that the spirits industry experienced. You have shifting customer sentiment where people are not as interested in buying high dollar bourbon when there are great, low cost, easy to find alternatives on the shelf. Many people are starting to realize they've overbought in their bourbon collection and they don't need any more whiskey right now, and they're just concentrating on drinking the things that they've already purchased. At the end of the day, you put all of those factors together, and for Stoli USA, the math was no longer mathing. So what does that mean? Well, you need to understand that they are reorganizing, and this is not a liquidation. So when you're in a reorganizational bankruptcy, it basically allows you to pause some payments to some of your creditors that you have a legal obligation to pay. It allows you to renegotiate some of your terms that you have with individuals. It might allow you to find some refinancing options that are more advantageous. But it's all done under the supervision of a trustee whose job it is to make sure that all the different creditor classes that could be affected by this bankruptcy are being treated fairly according to predetermined rules of the bankruptcy courts. And so that means that there is zero chance that a single penny is going to be spent on a theme park while they're in bankruptcy reorganization. No trustee is going to authorize them to go and waste resources on this wild idea that a bourbon theme park is going to be the next big thing, right? So if the organization itself wanted to do something that was required to keep normal business operations going, odds are that's going to be allowed and they're going to be able to spend money on that, right? But if they want to do something that's, a risky, kind of speculative move to expand the business, chances are they're not going to be able to do that until they come out of bankruptcy protection and all of the creditors have been taken care of. And so the theme park is effectively indefinitely put on hold. You also should probably watch the market for deals as they try to generate cash, because like my friend that was able to buy some 12-year whiskey, which I tried, and it was amazing, for a relatively reasonable price. You're talking about, something less than $10 per year of age. There may be some situations where Kentucky Owl has to continue to liquidate their high value inventory at below market prices to get rid of it quick so that they can generate some cash. And I would also expect to see in the future a shift away from Kentucky Owl's old high age, high price business model. And I think that you're going to start to see them, as they come out of this reorganization, start to focus on a more reasonable price point with more reasonable ages and try to appeal to a larger market instead of trying to make all of their money off of the irrational exuberance of the whiskey enthusiast community. But I do expect them to survive this. I don't think that the theme park will ever be built, even after they come out of bankruptcy. So, hope this information was interesting for you. If you are unfamiliar, we always do a giveaway on this channel. This time we are going to have 3 winners, and that is because we're a little bit low on liquid. So I think there's 3 ounces in here, but this pour might be below the shoulder if you're one of the winners. But we're going to give away all of the Kentucky Owls that I currently have in my possession. So that's going to include the Kentucky Owl Confiscated, the Kentucky Owl Batch 1 Rye, which is one of my favorite ryes of all time, and the Kentucky Owl Batch 2 Rye, 1 ounce of each, 3 winners. All you have to do to enter to win is like this video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell so you're notified of future content, which will also notify you of future giveaways because we do a giveaway on every episode. And then most importantly, you have to go to YouTube. Below the player head in the video description, there's a link for you to click on, fill it out. It gives us your basic information. We'll run a randomizer, post the results publicly online for accountability, reach out to the winners, get your address, and ship you your samples absolutely for free. And if you like this content and you want to support this channel, consider joining Patreon. We have a lot of member benefits and we have price points for every budget. So don't think that your budget's too tight and you can't afford to give. If you care about this channel, its mission, its content, there is a price point that would work for your budget. And it's not just a one-way street. We have a lot of bonus content, special offers. We do a kind of curated whiskey trips we call distillery takeovers, single barrel opportunities that are Patreon exclusive, in-person meetups, whenever I'm traveling for the Prideful Goat, and then we do monthly virtual bottle shares online, and you get discounts on all of the Bourbon Real Talk merch. And speaking of merch, that is another way that you can support this channel because we have a lot of really amazing whiskey products that were specifically designed by whiskey people for whiskey people. I promise you, if you go check out our merch and you love whiskey, you're going to see something that you can't live without. And last but not least, you could support this channel by supporting my real estate business. So running a podcast is not always profitable, and my real estate company has always subsidized my time to be able to create this channel. I do operate as a residential real estate agent in the Houston and Dallas metro areas. So if you're looking for an agent, I'd love to interview. And if we end up closing a deal, I do give allocated whiskey bottles as closing gifts. And if this is your first time tuning in, we'd love to thank you for the view, but also let you know a little bit about why we do what we do. Yes, we love whiskey. Yes, we love education. But the real motivation for us is to help people get connected to each other through whiskey, because whiskey as a conduit seems to bring people together, even sometimes people who have different ideological views who maybe otherwise wouldn't have formed a connection. And that's something that's important to me. Because I think that a diverse friend group is important. I think that it helps people stay grounded to this world. And I lost a loved one to suicide who had started to lose some of that grounding. and I don't want that to happen to others. And so I created this channel to give you the opportunity to get connected to whiskey. Whiskey will help you get connected to other people. And if you want connection, you do have to have a way to interact with other enthusiasts. And a lot of the forums out there have some people in them we generally refer to as trolls. They can be very negative and say hateful things online. And so they basically taught us two things. One, we needed to create our own forum, which we did, called Bourbon Real Talk Community. It is a free Facebook-based whiskey enthusiast forum. You can go join right now for free. There's lots of great things going on in there, way beyond just whiskey information, although that's there as well, but no troll behavior. And it's been so successful, we were able to parlay that into creating a suicide prevention and intervention nonprofit called livestayproject.org. All of that is administered inside the Bourbon Real Talk family. And the other thing that those trolls taught us was that if they can hate a stranger online, there's nothing that keeps us from loving a stranger online. And that's why we end every episode the same way, and that's this. If you woke up this morning and you're unsure whether or not anyone loved you, just know that I love you. And I'll see you next time on Bourbon Real Talk. A whiskey troll is a person who seeks negative attention and uses contrarian attitudes to derail civil discussion in online forums. They communicate in ways they never would face-to-face because they're keyboard warriors. Their only goal is to make other people feel inferior.
Hey guys, I'm new here. I just got my first Blanton's.
And trust me, you probably paid way too much.
I don't care much about the Blantons, but nice.
There's no way that she didn't buy that at secondary, idiot.
Oh, I know how you got that bottle.
So, are you sick and tired of the whiskey trolls running your fun online? Well, that's why we started Bourbon Real Talk Community. Congratulations. Let me know what you think when you open it up.
Hey, welcome to the group. Let me send you over a sample of Blanton's Gold and straight from the barrel. See how you like those.
I remember back to my first bottle of Blanton's. It was the birthday to my son, and we enjoy it every year on his birthday. Congrats.
So if you're looking to connect with some people online who aren't, head over to facebook.com and join Bourbon Real Talk Community today.